Good afternoon or good evening or good morning, wherever you may be. My name is Vic van Vuren. I'm the chair of the United Nations Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy, and it gives me a great pleasure to host this meeting and to moderate the session for this afternoon out of Geneva. Thank you to all our panelists who are on board. This afternoon I have with me Chantal-Lynn Carpentier, the chief of the New York office of UNCTAD, so it will be good morning to you. Il Chong Yi, the Senior Research Coordinator, UNRIST. Il Chong, I presume you're in Geneva, so good afternoon to you. Simil Essem, the Head of the Cooperatives Units of the ILO, also in Geneva. Good afternoon to you. Luca Renda, who is the Head of Recovery Solutions and Human Mobility at the Crisis Bureau of UNDP. Wenyan Yang, Chief of Social Perspective on Development Branch at UNDESA in New York. And Antonella Neuer, the head of the Social Economy and Innovation Unit of the OECD. Welcome to all of you. Some technical information before we start. The event will last 1 hour 30. It will be held in English. The first part of the program will be the speaker's intervention, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. During the whole event, if you have questions, please, you'll note at the bottom of your screen, there's a button for questions and answers. Please put your questions in there, and we'll get the panelists to answer them. And then also there's the chat box where you can deposit information and send messages along the lines there. The live streaming of the event is available. The link will be put up, and also the recording will be available after the event. I think at this stage, it's rather sad. We got the news yesterday of the death and passing away of Mr. Wonsoon Park, the mayor of Seoul, and it's with great sadness that we received this information. As the mayor of the city of nearly 10 million people, Wonsoon Park was one of South Korea's most influential politicians and played a high profile in its response to the coronavirus pandemic. He was a prominent human rights activist and a lawyer, and he had been the mayor of Seoul since 2011. But for today's meeting, he was a strong proponent of putting forward the social and solidarity economy. He will be sorely missed. I'm going to just ask for 1 moment silence in recognition of the great work, and then I will interrupt the silence and we can continue. Thank you. I'll start the moment of silence now. Thank you. We now move on with our program, and I'm going to give just a brief background of the United Nations Task Force for those of you who don't know who we are. It was created in 2013 with 18 members from within the UN system and 13 observer groups. It is known as the UN Interagency Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy, and its aims are to raise the visibility of the social and solidarity economy within the UN system and beyond. We enhance the recognition of the role of the social and solidarity economy enterprises and organizations. We promote knowledge of this topic, and we support the establishment of enabling institutional and policy environment on the social and solidarity economy. And lastly, we ensure the coordination of international efforts. Last year we met and we put up some, we agreed on certain objectives, and we've got 3 main objectives. I think it's the next slide. If you can move on, I'm going a little bit quickly because I don't want to lose time. You'll see there we've got 3 priority objectives which were agreed in Trento in Italy last year. We're supporting governments to put forward a UN resolution, and this is ongoing as we talk. We've created a knowledge hub for the SDGs, and we have an operational program that we are launching now, and we'll be talking to possible partners in this regard, which is for the development of an enabling environment in the different economies, particularly the developing economies. We will also be looking at education and a local dimension of social and solidarity economy. You'll see the action plan is available if you want to take that up further. We've also put out a UN task force statement, and you can read more about that. I'm not going to read the whole screen, but it's a specific statement of the role of the social and solidarity economy and its impact of trying to manage and deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. All right, after that statement, we can get down to business, and I'm now going to introduce our panelists one by one. And I'm going to open the floor, first of all, to Chantal Carpentier, who's the chief of the New York office of UNCTAD, and she'll speak about the SSE as a part of the emerging economic models to which we must switch to achieve the SDGs and rebuild better. Right, I've said enough. Chantal, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And let me see if I can share my screen with you. Let me know if you can see it. Can you see my screen? Yes, good. So basically, let me go through this real quick since we don't have a lot of time, but I guess I could just take 2 seconds and the answer is yes, a lot. So the bottom line is we can't achieve the SDG 1 to 10 with the existing economic and financial model. This has been made evident by the Global Sustainable Development Report, the panel of experts, as well as the Club of Rome, without actually exasperating the stress that we're putting on SDG 12, 13, 14, and 15. And the recovery should be great. A lot of people are talking about green, a lot of people are talking about inclusive, but it needs to also be resilient and it needs to be circular. We can't waste another crisis. And then there are proven emerging economic models out there that have been put forward. And unfortunately, oftentimes SSE is not part of that mix. And I think it's our job, and there's people on this webinar to ensure that it is. And we actually can help the social solidarity economy organization as well as the MSMEs to achieve a planet-centered and resilient and green economy and recovery. I'm not going to go into the detail of this. I think everybody on this call know that this pandemic has created the worst economic recession since the Great Depression, with great hardship for especially the poorest amongst us being hit the most, and most of them not having social protection floor, but I will let my ILO colleague talk about that. But just to mention that it has deepened inequalities and highlighted the need for resilience, job creation, innovation, and creation. And when we look at the fiscal policies that have been put out there by our member state to address these issues, it is clear that this pandemic was a wake-up call of the crucial role of the micro, small, medium enterprises as the fabric of our communities and economies, and they are to be part of the immediate relief as well as the recovery. And when you go through, of course, the G20 packages, it's obvious that the MSMEs are part of that. But when you look at the other developing countries, they also have tax and utility break and funds to support the MSMEs and wage support and business facilitation. However, very rarely do we see the social solidarity economies entities actually singled out and reflected in these packages. And yet, we know we're going to have to focus on job creation, and SSCEOs provide 10% of the job out there. So a lot of talk has been about the green recovery, but if we really want to be serious about leaving no one behind and not just use it as a tagline that we feel good about, and we want to make sure that this recovery is people-centered and community resilient, we need to actually have the SSE that accompany the other economic innovation that we have out there to ensure that we actually have the resources shared across the population. So one of these alternative economic models that are being put forward as solution, of course, the circular economy has been talked a lot about, so I'm not going to go in detail, but something that is actually important for this community is frugal innovation, which is not enough talked about, as well as the creative economy. And these models can actually deliver on green social, but not necessarily on the inclusive part. And this is where I want to focus on the frugal innovation a little bit. This is an example from Juliet in India. And so the frugal innovation, what's important about it is that it views inequalities and climate change and other environmental issues, i.e. the thing we're trying to address in the SDGs, as business opportunities instead of as liabilities. And their business model is smaller margin, larger volume. And instead of what we teach in our business school of let's target the 1 billion, let's target the 5 billion people out there, and then at the same time achieve the SDGs. And actually, these social solidarity economy enterprises are actually better fit to deploy frugal innovation that do better with less, because they actually are in the business of just doing that. And there are serious business opportunities of advancing the SDGs. We all know that. I'm not going to go into detail of those, but these, if you take them from a lens of frugal innovation, are great business opportunity for MSMEs and social solidarity enterprises. But the creative economy also has great potential, because it actually supports sustainable entrepreneurship and stimulate innovation, but also influences people's value, consumption, and lifestyle choices. And also it involves a lot of our young people, where the majority of unemployment is, and basically that are more focused on purpose, and also are great for developing countries. And our study at UNTAD shows that actually the creative economy in the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, actually were less affected than the rest of the economy. So they're more resilient. So what's the role of SSE to recover better? We all know this. It can help create jobs, economic diversification, resilience, and reduce inequality, because they do incorporate those marginalized groups in the value chain, and the ownership and the productive asset, as well as benefit sharing. Now, if you look at the release about a month ago, our UN Secretary General's Socio-Economic Response to COVID-19, which has 5 pillars. The third one, which ILO, FAO, and UNCTAD has worked on most, is the economic response that is protecting job, MSMEs, and the informal sector workers. And unfortunately, we miss an opportunity to have the social solidarity economy here. But the 5th one here is social cohesion and community resilience. And this is clearly a comparative advantage for the social solidarity economy. So what is needed to increase? We need to increase our focus of the international community and the national government as they roll out their fiscal policies and their support stimulus packages, because we can't afford to waste another crisis. We need to add the SSE organization along with the MSMEs in the stimulus packages. We need to empower SSE to be key agent in implementing the socioeconomic response within the framework of the SDGs, and be planet-sensitive SDG accelerators. But for that, we need to provide them information, we need to provide them the capacity building, so that they can actually roll out and be aware and have the tools to develop pro-poor frugal innovation, apply the circular economy, and the creative economy principle. So over to you, Vic, with this. Looking forward to discussion and the rest of the panel's presentation.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and thank you for keeping to under your time. You still had a minute to spare there, so that was great. Thank you very much. We now move on to our next panelist, who is going to be Ms. Wenyan Young, Chief of the Social Perspective on Development Branch at UNDESA, and she'll speak about why and how better recovery should focus on tackling the pre-existing factors that worsen the socio-economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the importance of including SSE in devising reconstruction measures. Wenyan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vic, and I want to thank you for your wonderful introduction of the task force, and for organizing this webinar. Now, I just want to open my intervention by kind of pulling back a little bit to remind all of us of the commitments world's leaders made in 2015 at the Sustainable Development Summit, that is to implement the 2030 Agenda to achieve 17 Sustainable Development Goals for all people in all the world. This will lead us to a future that's characterized by shared prosperity for people and sustainability of our planet. So this vision promises to leave no one behind and support those most left behind first. So of course, significant progress has been made in the past few years. However, we also know that the world was not on track to achieve all the SDGs for all people in all the countries by 2030. So to accelerate progress, the Secretary General of the UN launched a decade of action and delivery as the UN enters its 75th year. At this very critical moment, the new coronavirus blindsided our world. We know its impact, we are living through it. Today, the WHO reports a total of over 12 million confirmed cases in the world. And among those, that includes more than 550,000 people who have lost their lives. So this COVID-19 crisis is reversing hard-won progress in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Let me just show to share a screen to show with the few slides to see how, you know, all the now let me find my slides, of course. I had them before, so now where is it? No, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Maybe I need some help from Susan. Probably that would be faster to do it rather than me trying to figure out, right?
Valentina, are you able to help?
Yeah, Susan.
Oh, I lost my.
There we go.
Oh, here. Yeah, it's on screen now, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, let me move. Okay. Here you can see all the sustainable development goals and a few highlights of how the COVID-19 is affecting the SDGs. By the way, this is available on the UN website, and you can, you know, when you have time, you can take a closer look. And I know it's not very user-friendly to jam so much information into one slide, but I think it's important and useful to share the overall information. Of course, I come from the social development side. I will move to the next slide where I will focus more on the impact of COVID-19 on social development. So we know the social dimension of the 2030 agenda is a very important component and interlinked to the economic and environmental side. And in the social development area, there are some very important issues, such as what's happening to poverty. Of course, with the COVID-19, first we see the impact on the health side, which is, you know, SDG 4. I believe is SDG 4. And then, of course, the measures to try to contain the spread of the virus is actually having huge impact on the economy, which then filters into people losing jobs. ILO gave us estimates of at least 305 million full-time jobs, the equivalent of a lost work time, equivalent to 305 million full-time jobs. And then, of course, when people don't work, if they don't have access to unemployment benefits, they lose income, they and their families fall into poverty. So definitely SDG 1 is suffering. And of course, we also look at what's happening to inequality. Well, we see signs that all kinds of inequalities are being exacerbated by the health crisis. Then the other, remember, I think SDG 16 is a peaceful to achieve peaceful and stable society. What's happening there? Well, we know that at the time of crisis, sometimes, you know, it's often that there's this so-called rally around the flag effect, that people actually, first of all, realize the importance of public institutions and public services. And they also have a tendency to support their governments and their institutions to deal with this kind of crisis of large scale. But at the same time, we have also seen a crisis also make people more suspicious, and sometimes the not so great human instinct of looking for somebody to blame. So that also actually that at the same time undermines social cohesion and social stability. Lots of social problems are kind of triggered or sometimes reignited by this kind of crisis. So there we see the impact on social stability and social cohesion is kind of a mixed bag. So we really need to kind of address the problems and take the opportunity we have to promote greater solidarity and cooperation to deal with our collective challenge. Now, let me move out of the immediate impact of the crisis to well, why we need to address existing factors such as poverty, inequality, and exclusion. Well, because the impact, although the virus doesn't discriminate, but the impact does, that different people, because of existing factors, they actually bear different degrees of impact from the pandemic. So that evidences is showing that that pre-existing factors matter in terms of the impact. Let's just take poverty. People living in poverty face lots of challenges that those of us who don't live in poverty can't even imagine sometimes in their everyday life. They live in overcrowded quarters. That is, if they even have a place to live. Those places will typically have very limited access to water and basic sanitation. So for them, hand washing and social distancing to prevent infection is really not an easy task. They also struggle to make a meager living in subsistence and informal jobs with no social protection, and often depends on close personal contact to actually perform their jobs, therefore increase.
Wenyan, I'm going to ask you to start wrapping up, please.
Yeah, okay. So those, poverty really make the impact much worse for people. And then informality, ILO had done lots of work that I would just let ILO colleagues to elaborate on that. Informality definitely has huge impact on how you cope with the fallout. And inequality, as I mentioned, pre-existing inequality, that if you work in the sectors most affected, you are more exposed. If you are a woman and girls, they face increased unpaid care responsibilities at home during quarantine. So the persons with disabilities, they need certain services, but the lockdown is preventing them from receiving those services. So many examples shows that inequality worsen the impact of the health crisis, and at the same time, such inequalities are also amplified by the crisis. So if we want to recover better to a more resilient future, we need to address those pre-existing factors so that we are not building back to the old normal. We need to build back better and greener and more resilient. And when it comes to the role of SSE, needless to say that the social solidarity economy can contribute and enable a more inclusive and greener recovery that will bring us back on track to a sustainable future. So that's, I think here, I would just end here because I think what Chantal had just illustrated in her presentation of the various innovations and business models that SSE are actually very well situated to engage and take advantage of, is where the scope and space is for SSE in this more inclusive and better recovery. I finish here. Thank you.
Thank you, Wenyan. I must apologize, I got the speaker order mixed up, so I put a surprise onto Chantal by calling you first. I think it was you to come in second and Wenyan first, so sorry if I just got you a little bit, I got the thing a little bit confused. But anyway, thank you very much, Wenyan, for your input once again. That was great. I now move to the next speaker, who is going to be Antonella Neuer. I hope I've got the order right now. Head of Social and Economy and Innovation Unit at the OECD. And she's going to speak about the long-term investments and public policies in the plural economy and why they're important, along with the promotion of more inclusive indicators. Antonella, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vic, also for having organized this very timely gathering. Thanks a lot. So I will use my 8 minutes to try to reassert the importance of social economy actors in the recovery from the crisis, including in the transforming role of social economy. I will develop a bit more later. I would like also to reassert the importance of public policies at the different level to support the social economy to develop further, and the importance of, as you said, of long-term investment in social economy, including at regional level, as we are seeing more and more the importance that region and cities are paying to social economy as an economic and development tool, and also the need to create indicators that capture the full and specific contribution of social economy to our economy and society. I want also to say that I was very pleased to see that in this debate we refer to the notion of plural economy. And I think that we should use more and more this notion, because the COVID-19 crisis, but also the previous crisis, have showed that we need an economy in which different economic actors and business models coexist, and the plurality of actors with different features operate in the economy. And I must admit that I am particularly happy to see this notion of plural economy back, as this is an idea that the OECD put forward in 1996 in a publication, which I'm sure some of the participants remember, which is called Reconciling Economy and Society Towards a Plural Economy, in which we acknowledge the importance of the social economy as an important economic actor able to provide contribution to inclusive and sustainable growth. So referring to plural economy and linking it to social economy, I think it's even more important now, as the COVID crisis really calls for a rebalancing of economic efficiency and economic and social resilience throughout the economy. And of course, the social economy has a central role to make this happen, not only thanks to its traditional role of repairing social problems, and of course we have seen that during the crisis, social economy actors have been at the forefront of the crisis, and they have played an essential role in addressing the challenges brought by the crisis, but also in its transforming role. What do I mean by the transforming role of social economy? Social economy has a larger transformation role to play in the post-COVID period, so to accompany and inspire transformation to move to a more inclusive and sustainable economy and society, and therefore, of course, in helping achieving SDGs. And of course, in order to do so, to continue to offer social innovative solutions that can help to shape the economic and social recovery, the role of public policies is essential. And this is the second point I wanted to highlight. We are preparing at the OECD a policy note on the role of social economy during and post the COVID-19 crisis. And we are also insisting on the fact that concrete policy measures in the form of framework condition and resources, of course, are needed to support the experimentation and collaboration and help scale successful social innovation, which are more than needed to shape the recovery after the crisis. And among the most important policies by national and subnational governments that we have identified to capitalize on the long-term transformation potential of social economy, we list the fact that government should define a shared vision about the future, as we say at the OECD, the future to build back better, ensuring that social economy organizations have a seat at the table in which policy making is done. We also think that it is important to develop an action plan to achieve that transition to a more sustainable and inclusive development model, clarifying the role that social economy has to do with the recovery plan. And of course, we encourage governments to think to promote social innovation practices and cooperation, including through funds to support experimentation and innovation, social innovation, as it is done for technological innovation, and also to continue to diversify the financial resources available to social innovation organizations. And finally, and this is an important aspect which links with the creation of indicators that would be relevant, also create and share tools that provide data on social impact that are not too onerous, but that can document the progress and steer the activities of social economy. So these are just quick hints on the importance of long-term policies to accompany this transforming role of the social economy. But of course, we all know that many social economy organizations have experimented and are experimenting right now difficulty also to continue to work due to the impact of the COVID crisis in terms of cash flow problems or drops in activity. So short-term policy are also needed. So when it comes to long-term investment, it is important to underline that long-term investment are essential and for supporting job growth, creation and stabilities, be this at national level and subnational level. And I would like just to give you some example on the role also of long-term investment at subnational level, because we at the OECD, we have calculated that the subnational governments are responsible for 40% of public investment and nearly 60% of public spending. So it is very important to refer to the regional level, also giving the very important and strong local roots of social economy. So during the emergency, subnational governments have undertaken proactive initiative to provide social community support. And we know, unfortunately, that in the longer term, there will be a rise in employment and hopefully social expenditure will increase. So it is important to continue to support long-term investment. When it comes to long-term investment in social economy, we have released very recently a study on regional strategies for social economy development, and we have analyzed some regions in France, Sweden, Poland, and Spain, and we have observed that most of these countries have used and smartly used important amounts of funds coming from the European Commission to support the development of social economy, both at national and regional level. For instance, Spain has agreed to invest 1 billion euros overall in social economy, of which 800 million are from the European Social Fund. And from this overall budget, about 31 million is targeted specifically to social economy. And in addition to the national operational program, there are regional operational programs of around 300 million. So you see a smart use of long-term investment opportunity provided by the European funds is something that the government should really look at. I will not insist on Poland, but it is very well known that Poland is one of the countries which uses European social funds in the most effective way, including to support social economy. And in Sweden, there is a strategy which has been launched a couple of years ago with a budget of 11.5 million, and again, it is used to shape social economy, although this is not targeted to regional dimension. But by the way, it is just to underline the fact that from a policy perspective, we need to look at national and subnational level. And now
I need you to start wrapping up, Antonella.
Yeah, just very quickly. So some quick hints on the indicator. So we all know obviously that GDP is a beacon, of course, but not the only one, and that is a specialized tool and only measure monetary transaction, but does not help to portray a complete picture of how the human economic system fits within the social and environmental landscape. So I think that the work that OECD has done in measuring well-being can be an important platform, maybe, to look at when we look at dimension and areas that might be useful to capture the essence of social economy, because we have many dimensions ranging from social connections, civil engagement, and so on, and so work-life balance. And I would like to end with a reflection that I put on the table for the discussion of looking also at social capital indicators. We know that social capital is difficult to measure, but it can be a good proxy to try and identify indicators that can be used by social economy. And especially when it comes to network, relationship, and connection and trust, because I think that one of the role of social economy in the recovery plans is also to reinject trust in our economy and society, and reinjecting trust from bottom up. So there are many other indicators coming from civic engagement and voluntary activity, cooperation, social participation, political participation, that are very close to the values, principles, and practices of social economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonella. That was great. We're now going to move on to the next presenter, which is Sim Alessim, the head of cooperatives unit in the ILO. And the ILO Cooperatives Unit turns 100 years old this year. It was established in 1920. That's quite a history. And so, Samil, you've got to set us up for the next 100 years. And Samil will speak to us about the democratic governance and plurality of voices, in how important that is in times of crisis, how and why the SSE organizations and the ecosystem show a significant role as analytical and the post-crisis antidote. Samil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vic. The unfolding crisis around the pandemic is affecting us all, but it's not affecting everyone in the same way. We may all be facing the same storm, but we are not all on the same boat. Some are not on any boat, and some don't even have life jackets. Migrants, refugees, indigenous peoples, marginalized communities, persons with disabilities, workers in the informal economy are among the worst affected. 3/4 of the world's 2.1 billion informal economy workers are severely affected by the pandemic. There may be an estimated 60% decrease in their earnings. Among informal workers in Africa and Latin America, the decline is expected to be higher than 80%. And with the pandemic, a bad situation is likely to get worse, with workers who lose their formal jobs having to move to the informal economy. Self-help groups, collectives, saving and credit unions, worker cooperatives, and mutuals are a part of the SSE ecosystem that have always been the preferred form of organizing in the informal economy. During the pandemic, HomeNet South Asia, an organization of home-based workers, noted that 10% of their 900,000 members who still had work and income during the crisis belonged to cooperatives and producer companies. In Brazil, where 90% of recycling is done by waste pickers, there are close to 1,300 waste pickers, cooperatives, and associations, which serve their members in accessing social protection, occupational safety and health, and negotiating with public and private sector actors for their integration into waste management chains. Here are some findings from a survey of 150 waste picker cooperatives and associations in 21 states in Brazil on their responses to the pandemic. 98% provided their members with guidelines on virus prevention, essential safety measures, distributed protective equipment, hygienic supplies, and launched solidarity funds and crowdfunding initiatives. Historically, values of cooperation, mutualism, self-help witness a surge in popularity during times of crises. And in such times, there is increasing interest in existing SSE institutions, expansion of their missions to address the emerging needs, and informing new ones. During the global financial and economic crisis of 2007, there was an increase in membership and turnover of credit unions and food cooperatives. Responses to the Argentinian financial crisis of 2001 included workers taking over bankrupt companies to turn them into worker cooperatives. During the Greek debt crisis, new SSE efforts included refugee housing, community gardens, and kitchens. And mutual insurance providers have been developing crop insurance for increasing number of natural disasters due to climate change. With public health epidemics like AIDS, we also saw existing SSE initiatives expanding their work to address emerging needs like orphan care. Now coming to the ILO, toward fulfilling its mandate of creating decent work and promoting social justice, ILO has had a cooperatives unit, as Vic said, which is responsible for the work on the cooperatives and wider SSE since 1920. There is a strong normative element to this work. International labor standards have addressed cooperatives and social economy since 1947. Promotion of the cooperatives recommendation of 2002, number 193, calls for establishing and expanding a viable and distinctive, dynamic and distinctive sector of the economy, which includes cooperatives that respond to social and economic needs of the community. More recent standards like the Declaration on the Future of Work have mentioned cooperatives, and wider social economy together. There is also interest from ILO's member states and workers' organizations in having a discussion at an upcoming International Labour Conference on SSE toward a possible standard. The 20th International Conference of Labour Statisticians adopted guidelines concerning statistics of cooperatives in October 2018, and there are recent efforts by members and observers of the UN Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy on advancing SSE statistics as well. The ILO has a dynamic and growing portfolio of development cooperation projects, research and training initiatives on cooperatives and wider social and solidarity economy since the elaboration of an SSE definition and the regional action plan that took place at a conference in Johannesburg in 2009. The ILO has organized 10 SSE academies with over 1,500 policymakers, researchers, and practitioners. And research initiatives have explored financing mechanisms for innovative SSE ecosystems, role of SSE and social finance for sustainable development and the future of work. And more recent research and capacity building initiatives are focusing on policy and institutional environment for SSE in 6 countries in East and Southeast Asia. ILO is supporting the elaboration and implementation of cooperative development policies in Sri Lanka and the occupied Palestinian territory. In Tunisia, the ILO has been working with the government, social partners, and SSE stakeholders for the past 6 years toward the co-creation of SSE policy framework law, and this has culminated in the adoption of an SSE bill in the Tunisian parliament last month. And the similar policy is in the making in South Africa with ILO support in partnership with our constituents and SSE actors. These are timely for creating a conducive environment for SSE to help build resilience against future crises. And there are lessons we have learned already, I think, from the pandemic. First, systemic problems require systemic solutions. And toward that end, governments need to invest in a plurality of business models beyond the shareholder model. There's strength in diversity, member-owned cooperatives, mutuals, employee-owned businesses, social enterprises, and other SSE institutions that prioritize social and environmental goals are more resilient during crises, and they need to be a part of policies and actions for resilience. For better preparedness against future shocks, public and private sector actors need to invest in those that provide quality services in healthcare, education, sanitation, social protection. These are sectors where SSE actors abound. The first wave of the pandemic has also shown us the value of localized community level actions. SSE actors are critical in strengthening local communities in partnership with public and private sector institutions. And at that point, multi-stakeholder partnerships are going to be key in designing relevant and innovative policies and actions to better overcome crises and to make much needed changes for transformation of our societies and economies. I would like to conclude by reminding us all of an old saying: if you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, travel together. Let us travel together. Thank you, and back to you, Vic.
Thank you very much, Samel, for your great presentation as well. And I'm now going to give the floor to Luca Renda, the Head of Recovery Solutions and Human Mobility at the Crisis Bureau UNDP, and he'll speak about why and how SSE has enormous potential in finding innovative solutions at the local level and therefore in localizing SDGs with special focus on a just transition. Luca, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Vic, and good day to everyone, and to the panelists, the distinguished panelists, and to all the 100 participants in this event. It gives me a great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for the inviting, and thank you, Vic, and all the colleagues for the great work you do on the task force, of which we are proud members, and we definitely support the work plan. We appreciated the statement and participated to it, and we look forward to having a resolution approved by the General Assembly. You'll see that my remarks will echo a lot some of the intervention that my colleagues made before. I would like to start by, I just read recently the report issued by Philip Alston, the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. He just concluded his mandate, and it's always very interesting to read his reports, very provocative and very abrasive, but definitely always spot on. And he said, I mean, he summarizes very, very clearly. The world, he said, is at an existential crossroad, involving a pandemic, a deep economic recession, devastating climate change, extreme inequality, and a movement challenging the prevalence of racism in many countries. Last year, UNDP released the Human Development Report, like we do every year, and this one was focused on inequality. And the report highlighted that, yes, there have been important improvements in well-being over the past 3 decades. However, those very dynamics that drove this improvement also drove inequalities and new kinds of inequalities and unsustainable patterns of production and consumption, gender inequality and violence. The current crisis, as my colleague said before, is causing an unprecedented reversal of some core developmental trends on a global scale. Now, since we started measuring Global Development Index back in 1990, this is the first time that we are expecting a decline in the Global Development Index since we started the calculation. This is unprecedented. And at the same time, we know the crisis exacerbated pre-existing and growing inequalities and is hitting the most vulnerable and widening multidimensional exclusion. So we have, and the Secretary General of the UN has said it many times, and most of our principles have reiterated this in many, many occasions, we have a collective responsibility to promote and accelerate the transition to a more inclusive, smarter, innovative, environmentally sustainable development pattern. But as many reports have mentioned it, and as the recent UN Recovery Framework, which we all contributed to, has said, we cannot do this simply through absorptive capacity or simply adapting the current system. There is no new normal. There has to be a better normal, as the statement that you published just said. But this requires a comprehensive, integrated, systemic approach, which looks at complexity of societies and addresses the interconnection between different actors, sector, and governance level, looks at the politics of development, but at the same time looks at the trade-offs, the sequences in terms of policy making. And especially, I want to underline in my remarks, the focus on the local and territorial level is more needed than ever, because that's where the effect of exclusion and inequality materialize, and where solutions are often devised through stronger adaptive and regenerative capacities. All of us who have worked in the UN for a long time and who have worked in the field know that at the local level is often where you achieve the best result, where our work is more rewarding, because that's the closest level of government and development action to the people. And now the UN has, and many of the agencies are represented here, we have a long-standing experience in supporting local processes and strategies, working side by side with national partners at the central local level, with UN agencies, and a wide range of international partners, not only the traditional donors, but many of those that are included in that so-called decentralized cooperation, cities, regions, association of municipalities, etc. And over the years, we've helped countries develop effective local development agendas, integrating social and environmental standards with economic plans. We have promoted processes based on multi-stakeholder engagement, including small producers, cooperatives, women, minority groups, that have allowed to build or rebuild trust and cohesion, community resilience, and reactivation of disrupted economies. For decades, we have learned from best practices around the world and supported specific platform, for example, public-private platform, like the local economic development agencies, particularly in conflict or disaster-affected contexts. to catalyze support for the implementation of local strategies, to provide access to business and social services, credit, and access to markets. At UNDP recently, we have established the network of the UNDP Accelerator Labs, 60 teams covering 78 countries, soon to be expanded to 100, as a mechanism for promoting innovation in development through actionable intelligence and tested solutions with national and local partners, including many of the SSE actors. And today, we are convinced more than ever that SSE model and practice have the potential to drive and accelerate these transformative processes that I mentioned before, and they are required to bring us back on track to achieve the SDGs, bring them at the local level, and promote this transition to more equitable and sustainable society. The potential of SSE is grounded in its very nature as inherently locally rooted, multi-actor and multi-dimensional process. SSE represents forms of territorial intelligence that promote economic flows and markets based on proximity circuits, but also on quality, territorial origin, know-how, social networks, material and intangible cultural heritage and biodiversity, practices of sustainable valorization and conservation of natural resources, and clean and renewable energy. It creates value while addressing societal needs and relations, turning living conditions, the cohesion and the well-being of citizens into key factor and opportunity for more inclusive and sustainable development. And it connects the local demand and supply of goods and services through integrated and localized circuits of production, commercialization, and consumption. In sum, SSE integrates the principles of economic efficiency with equity and ecological balance and constitute an alternative economic paradigm that is fully rooted in people, communities, and territories. However, and echoing what some of the colleagues said before, despite being linked to local realities, probably more than any other form of economic activity, we often observe that SSE is not always adequately reflected and built into the main drivers for local development. To enable the full potential of SSE, it is therefore critical to further its integration and complementarity with local governance and local development system, public policies, planning mechanisms, support organization and services, capacity, information, and communication. To unlock the potential of SSE in connection with local development system, we at UNDP, in collaboration with partners, we are supporting a variety of innovative approaches around the world. And some examples include in Bolivia, we support community-based tourism for sustainable development. In Thailand, through the establishment of a social innovation platform to reshape the local food system through a co-creation process with local stakeholders. In Colombia, through the implementation of new business model to address economic environment of vulnerable population in urban areas. In Cape Verde and in Algeria, institutionalizing a multi-stakeholder platform at municipal level that include SSE actors in the elaboration and implementation of local development strategies and programs. Right now, we are all engaged in responding to COVID-19, and we all engaged into implementing the socioeconomic framework laid out by the Secretary General. And UNDP has been asked to lead technically this process. And I want to particularly say that we, together with the country teams, we are particularly focused on the reactivation of economy, particularly focused on assessing the impact and designing program to support micro and small medium enterprises and contributing to Pillar 3 of the UN Recovery Strategy, which has been mentioned before. Let me end by saying that yes, the current crisis is endangering the progress towards SDG, we know that, but it also opens opportunities to collaborate in innovative ways. It is showing once again the critical role that local and regional governments have in leading strategies of renewal that are based on a continuous engagement between citizens and authorities. Let me end by saying that, and echoing some of my colleagues, we know that the world in January 2020 was neither environmentally sustainable, nor socially inclusive, nor economically resilient. We need to get back on track, but on a different path. With its foundation on principles solidarity, inclusion, sustainability, resilience, innovation, SSE embodies the essence of the future we need. the model of cooperation for collective good, which is the only way we can overcome this crisis and turn it into an opportunity, having the SDG as our compass. Thank you. Over to you, Vic.
Thank you very much, Luca. That was great. We now move to our last presenter, who is Il-Cheong Yi, the Senior Research Coordinator of UNRIST, who will speak about how and why SSE contribute in fulfilling central promise of the Agenda 2030 in leaving no one behind and promoting the access to basic rights, especially for the most vulnerable people. Over to you, Il-Cheong. Il-Cheong, you're still muted. Il-Cheong, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Vic. As previous speakers have already mentioned, COVID-19 has revealed the weakest links in our political, economic, and social systems. Observing the responses to COVID-19, I think it also has revealed the tensions and struggles which have been hidden in the SDGs language as well. The 2030 Agenda and the SDGs are a kind of political settlement and a big tent framework which could accommodate as diverse stakeholders and countries with different interests as possible. It is inevitable for this kind of big tent framework to include tensions and struggles over interpretations and implementations of the goals. I'd like to highlight the major tensions and struggles hidden in the SDGs language and how SSE can contribute to shaping the discourse, setting the agendas, and actually contributing to achieving the SDGs in this tension and struggle within SDGs context. First is transformation. Personally, I think the introduction of the idea and language of transformation or moving away from business as usual is a big progress from the MDGs. Problem is, everybody interprets it differently, in particular about the questions of what we have to transform, or we transform a society into what kind. Although some players frequently mention transformation, what they actually talk about as a society they want is same as what we have now. Others argue for a society different from this, but the model or even an image of their society is not that very clear. Secondly, leaving no one behind. Leaving no one behind, again, is a language which makes us excited, but there are different, sometimes contrasting views on how question. In particular, we can find different views and attitudes towards the current systems which continuously push somebody behind. They are often shown in terms of policies and institutions. Many policies and institutions propagated as the one to include as many people as possible, in fact, leave the system to push many people behind intact. Third is root causes. I cannot see any policy documents without mentioning root causes and the necessity to address them. And those documents sometimes suggest completely different or even contradictory solutions to social, environmental, and economic problems. There is a significant difference between policies and institutions aiming to address root causes in terms of scope and depth. Fourth, a balanced and integrated manner. We've been struggling to break down siloed approaches and siloed policies for a long time. In fact, the terms such as functional silo syndrome or stovepipe system were coined in the late 1980s. It's been almost 30 years now. Still, we don't have any clear ideas how to break down siloed approaches. We consistently do and repeat, try and errors in various dimensions. Lastly, being sustainable itself. The sustainable became a buzzword, but some people think we can be sustainable by incremental revisions and remedies, while others think we can be sustainable only when we have a society different from the one we have now. Again, this question leads us to go back to all those issues I talked about before. In this context of SDGs, full of tensions and struggles, how SSE, social and solidarity economy, can contribute to shaping the discourse, setting the agendas, and achieving the SDGs. I think SSE can make contributions at least 3 areas, such as discursive struggle, demonstration of workable models, and political action. And to make these contributions, SSE can fully utilize its several key assets. I lost my second slide. Can you see my second slide?
Is not.
We cannot see your presentation, Ethan. You're not sharing. You have to start sharing.
Okay. Maybe.
You
Yeah,
have to go down.
I can go.
I've heard everything you've said, Ilcham, but we haven't seen anything on the screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, I can go on without slides anyway. So, okay. So first is solidarity. In the 2030 agenda document, the term solidarity appears 3 times, and they are used in the context of partnership, such as, quote, global partnership based on a spirit of strengthened global solidarity, unquote, or, quote, solidarity with the poorest and with people in vulnerable situations, unquote. Solidarity, SSE is talking about, however, goes beyond partnership or just mutual sympathy, born of recognition of commonality or a mere sense of belonging. SSE is talking about a kind of robust form of solidarity, strong enough to move people to collective action. Solidarity in SSE is a source of organization and power to produce political, economic, and social justice. I think how SSE interprets and implements solidarity can help us to redefine solidarity as a justice-producing principle and value. And ultimately, I think SSE's interpretation and implementation of solidarity can make the interpretation and implementation of the SDGs more inclusive and transformative. Second asset is the mechanisms and practices of SSE to prioritize social and environmental objectives over the profit motives. The lessons and findings drawn from diverse experiences of SSE can make a great contribution or foundation to sort out the problem or question of how to break down siloed approaches and how to make a balanced and integrated approaches. Third is democratic self-governance. All those tensions and struggles over different interpretations and policies over the SDGs I talked about need a wider and deeper democracy, which can bring the vulnerable into the politics as a genuine player. The democratic self-governance, which is a key feature of SSE, can demonstrate how the vulnerable can be empowered and organized as a genuine player within and beyond organizations. Lastly but not least, local circuit of production and consumption. Localization of the SDGs is central to vertical integrated approach to achieving the SDGs. The lockdown due to COVID-19 clearly reveals how important to strike the balance between local and global economic activities and why we need to have more economic and social actors who can organize production and consumption in the way to meet the local demands and needs. SSE has been and will be at the center of this local circuit of production and consumption, and it can demonstrate its contribution to achieving the SDGs in both normal and abnormal situations as an agent of resilience and change. I'm very sorry about mishap regarding my slides, but I better stop here. Thank you very much. Over to you, Vic.
Just unmute, get back on board. Thank you very much, Il Chiang, for that input. There's a lot of questions that have been asked, and I'm going to just start with one question that covers cuts across all the presentations, and then we'll have to see how we take it from there. But many of the panelists, if you can check the question and answer that have come through, and if it's relevant for your particular topic, if you don't mind answering it online by responding in writing. But I'm going to start with the question of what strategies can be used to take the most advantage of the fact that there is more interest in social economy during the crisis, so that we don't miss this opportunity and interest after the crisis. I'm going to start in order of the speakers, and if you can perhaps just give one idea rather than a whole lot, we can just see one idea from each of you. So what strategies can be used to take the most advantage of the fact that there's interest in the social economy during this crisis? Chantel, your response?
Yes, thank you, Vic. And many people have asked also, what is it that UN is doing for MSMEs? I think our job is to ensure that we specifically mention the SSE organization, not just MSMEs, and then develop a capacity building model to help our SSE organization to deliver on the bottom-up pro-poor innovation that are needed to achieve the SDG, create job and resilience.
Thank you very much. If I could move to Wenyan.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to say that we still need to raise awareness. I think I would speak particularly in terms of showing examples and collect, good practices and disseminate such good practices, then supplemented by support for capacity development. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonella.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to insist on the need of promoting cooperation between social economy actors and non-social economy actors, and this can be done by offering a platform to share initiatives, so to increase the visibility, and also involving government in this kind of discussion. And as I was mentioning before, I think it is important to involve social economy organization in the strategic discussion that government are having right now to prepare their recovery plans, because this way social economy can help move to a more inclusive and sustainable growth.
Thank you. Luca?
Yes, I think a couple of things. One is, I would say, to involve the local actors in the design of recovery plans, particularly not only local governments and the municipalities and etc., but also all the fabric of the society at the local level, and not only involve them in the diagnostic and the design, but also make them part of the solution. I would say, particularly for SSE actors, they are particularly well placed right now to become the motor, the engine of the implementation of recovery programs. And I think that's a responsibility that falls not only in governments, but also on those who are providing, if there are credits, for example, or IFIs, and as well as agencies like UN and NGOs that are contributing to the design implementation of this program. Over.
Thank you. Simel?
I'm thinking, since we are the UN task force on SSE, if in each of our agencies we could bring the stream of work on co-ops and wider SSE into the mainstream of our institutions' work. UNTFSSE in its meetings and in its reports, UNCTAD the same thing, with UNDP and ILO, we have country offices, regional offices. If it could get into our we could get this SSE to be a part of the thinking on key issues, social and economic and environmental issues that our agencies are dealing with at the table. That I think would be a great start.
Thank you. Ilchang? You're still on mute, Ilchang. We can't hear you.
Sorry.
Okay, we can hear.
Yeah, I came across two stories which are very interesting regarding the role of SSE in the context of COVID-19 crisis. One is about the story of SSE in the context where government does not do anything, and other private actors wouldn't dare to do anything. SSE did something for people. I came across so many stories about cooperatives or social and solidarity economy organizations, locally organized, know very much about the situations in local areas. They were involved in distributing goods and services to people in the context of crisis, especially lockdown situations. Second story is about the attention and commitment of SSE to the most vulnerable people in society in the context of crisis. I mean, the organizations based on recruitment of those vulnerable people had a tendency to pay attention to the situation of the vulnerable people. And I came across so many interesting stories about SSE, which played a significant role in providing basic necessities to the most vulnerable people who would tend to be neglected and ignored by government and other private actors. So I think we can disseminate information about those kind of experiences, and we can claim the resilience of SSE in the context of crisis to a wider audience. Thank you. Over to you, Vic.
Thank you. We have a question here. I'm taking one out at random. Is to the panelists. Luca, I'm going to ask you to come in first in this. Can you explain a bit more on the new business model to be implemented to help support micro and informal businesses that have been impacted on by the crisis? Over to you.
Yeah, I don't have the pretension to explain a full new business model. What I can say is that definitely there are a few things that we're doing on the ground. And by the way, we're doing it in collaboration with other agencies. I want to mention in particular ILO and UNCDF to help very small businesses and micro and small businesses and cooperatives recover. But first of all, stay afloat, right, and recover. So there are two things, and they're connected. There is the whole area of making sure that the occupational safety health is taken care of. This is particularly a work that we are conducting together with ILO, and the possibility of going back to business in a safe way. And business continuity. So the other things that are important, one is working with governments and to provide access to cash, to credit or grants. Two is to adopt digital solution. I think this is really critical because a lot of the businesses right now can only survive if they adopt a digital solution for to be visible on the market, for e-commerce, and to promote their business, etc. So that what we have is a way to design a digital plan and accompany them for 4 months to make sure that they thrive. And then there is the issue of business transformation. A lot of time, these small companies can transform their business to adopt and produce maybe goods that are particularly useful for the COVID-19 response. in several countries, we are now supporting small businesses to produce, say, masks or PPEs, and these are just examples. But there is a way of in some cases of support and transformation. And again, with the idea of achieving this triple wins of social impact and economic impact and environmentally sustainable business. Over to you.
Thank you. Antonella, there's a question of what is expected of co-ops in this COVID crisis. Have you got some thoughts on that? Antonella, you there?
I think
okay.
Antonella just left. She apologized.
We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Can you hear me? This is Valentina.
Yes.
Antonella had to leave. She apologized.
Oh, but she's there. Oh, she left.
Yes.
Okay, she has to leave. So then I'm going to ask you, Chantal, if you can answer that. What is expected of co-ops in this crisis?
Well, this is not quite my area of expertise, but I think
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that they can be the lifeline, really, of restarting the economy, just like the micro small enterprises are. The problem is we've not really explicitly mentioned that and perhaps ILO is a bit more advanced than the other agencies on this, but we need to make sure we actually specifically mention them in our recovery and our immediate relief program that we have. So one of them, and I'm going to do that as a result of this call, this webinar today. As you know, with the Regional Commission, we're developing a platform, regional platforms, to have a one-stop shop for all micro small enterprises of all the programs that government are putting forward for them, as well as the international organization. So it would be, we should include in there our co-ops and other social solidarity economy organization. We also providing technical cooperation assistance to those in terms of, as well as support to the member states on how best to support those entities. And so this is where I'm taking it from the macro level, of course. This is where we can help co-ops help us.
Thank you. I'm going to come to you, Wenyan. There's a suggestion that this COVID is going to set us back years on the progress we've made in the social sector organizations on equity and with reference to equity for persons with disabilities. Is this going to be a huge setback, or are we going to somehow navigate through this that we can still keep that progress that we've made, or we're going to have to take some steps back and then try and come forward again? Your comment.
Yes, thank you for the question. I was just trying to type the answer. Well, unfortunately, I think at this moment, if we look at the landscape and what's happening, there is a real risk that there will be a setback in many of the areas, as mentioned. However, I'm a firm believer that we have some degree of control in where we end up, so that that kind of gloom and doom is not a preset course. And I think that as I believe Chantal and somebody else have also mentioned that the crisis is an opportunity. We shouldn't waste this opportunity. I know this is a cliche, but it's really true that this crisis is showing us many things, and I think is causing lots of people to rethink the way we produce, the way we consume, and even some of the values we hold. And I think this rethinking, this reflection, that if we incorporate those reflections into our rebuilding efforts, then we can stop this backsliding from happening. So, in terms of persons with disabilities, on gender and all that. And I think that we also have enough experience and good practices to draw on to how to do things better. I think that all the emergency responses, the stimulus packages are all good things, and we are moving in the right direction. However, short of a serious reflection, I'm afraid that we might end up into the back where we started before. And those measures, once they are they come to their end. You know, it's a 3-month program or 2-year program. When they come to the end, the beneficiaries are likely to remain as vulnerable as before. So we really need to think about, you know, fundamentally changing the ways we produce and consume. And I want to emphasize the importance of universal social protection, including social protection floors, that can help us to safeguard some of the progresses we have made. Thank you.
Thank you. Samil, how do we involve women and youth in the SSE processes and particularly in the COVID times? Is there a way of getting them more engaged?
I think already, especially among the new generation of cooperatives and wider social and solidarity economy organizations, there's a strong presence of women and youth. It's important for more established traditional sectors of the cooperative movement to accept and step up to the challenge of improving participation of women and youth, especially in the leadership positions. And I think one way to do that is activating the principle 6 of cooperatives, which is cooperation among cooperatives, for well-established, rich in resources cooperatives to reach out to these new modern cooperatives, workers, social cooperatives, and will reach out beyond to build alliances with other social and solidarity economy actors and social movements, women and youth. And there are a lot of issues where they can collaborate. And this is not so much for the primary level institutions of cooperatives, but the secondary, tertiary institutions, regional and international bodies.
Thank you. I'm going to give Ilchong 1 minute to come in at the end here, and then I'm going to ask one of our members from the observer side, Suzanne Visa-Hiskas, just to make a closing comment. I'm not sure, Mina, if she can get the floor, whether she's got access, but Ilchong, the Knowledge Hub, how can this be of use? The UN has got, the UN Task Force has got this Knowledge Hub. How can it be of use to our players out there? You're muted, Ilchong, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Everybody knows that Knowledge Hub has a lot of case studies containing different experiences in achieving different goals in the context of SDGs. And it has both success and failure stories. Success stories have kind of successful causes and factors, and failure stories have some kind of cautions and caveats we have to keep in mind to design and implement policies and institutions within the context of SSE. So I think in the context of crisis, I think you can draw the lessons from those different case studies in different regions, which can be tailor-made for your own experiment or your engagement with your problems. So Knowledge Hub is a source of information and knowledge from which you can draw the lessons and insights to design and implement your policy. So please visit UN Task Force Knowledge Hub to get the insights and lessons for your policies and institutions, for your organizations and society. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Suzanne, are you there?
I'm here, Vic. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you, Vic, for giving me the floor. My name is Suzanne. I lead the Euclid Network, the European Network for Social Enterprises, and we are one of the observers of the task force. And I've been listening with great interest. And what I would like to echo from what was said by the experts, and this will only take a minute, is that, you know, even though this audience and the global impact actors are aware of the vital role of social economy actors, I think what we learned in this crisis and also recent reports, they show us that what is lacking in our field is visibility, a common voice. And I very much support the opening message by Chantal. You know, it's our job to fix that. And so looking at, you know, what was reported to be the main issues and what can we learn from the actions taken by countries to respond to the crisis is that social economy is not recognized by governments as a strategic partner in general. social economy actors are not involved, therefore not supported, and they're not organized, and the ecosystem is still very much in its emerging phase. And I think like how we now experience what is happening in this crisis is that the sector is very active in organizing itself. This summer, we see the launch of 5 national organizations for social enterprise in Turkey, Switzerland, the Republic of Ireland. And this is Europe alone. And in the Middle East and North Africa, our peers are really building social economy networks and reaching out to us, also to share their learnings and for us to share our learnings. So when we say, I think that social enterprises are needed more than ever before, I think the social economy actors, they need us to build viable ecosystems now more than ever. And echoing Simel's words, I think including all social economy actors, celebrating their diversity, but also focusing on our common mission is an important topic for us, and also to adopt a multi-stakeholder approach. So we're going to spend the weekend thinking about how we can best support the sector, and I would like to leave it at that. Thank you, Vic.
Thank you very much. We've had many questions. We're not going to be able to go beyond our time now. We've had a long session, but thank you to our panelists for an excellent input from your side. Thank you to those of you who organized this behind the scene. You'll see Mina and Valentina and all those who helped. But most of all, thank you to you for participating and joining us. For the many questions, hopefully we could have answered them online. We don't have time to answer them verbally through the panelists. But I just wish to remind you that on Tuesday, the 15th of July, there's an HLPF, a high-level political forum event, which is happening in New York, where the French government has organized this. It's an official side event on the social economy and women empowerment. And there will be the permanent mission of France to the United Nations with Mr. Christophe Itier, who are coordinating and arranging this. There'll be the Vice President of Mr. Alexandre Palt, the Executive Vice President, Chief Corporate Responsibility Officer of L'Oreal will be on there. REPES, one of our partners, is on there, Catalyst 2030. I'll be speaking on behalf of the task force. Mr. Marvin Rodriguez Cordero, the Vice President of Costa Rica. Mr. Nicholas Schmidt, the European Commissioner of Labor and Social Rights. Ms. Yolanda Diaz, the Minister of Labor and Social Economy of Spain. And you can see there's many people who will be talking to this topic. It's a very important one for us, where we're looking to promote the government and support the governments who are looking for a UN resolution on the social economy. I think we sometimes underestimate the importance of the social and solidarity economy in the impact it can have, not only during COVID, but as someone said there, what was the problem beforehand, before COVID? Were there no problems? There certainly have been problems. We need to increase our footprint as the social and solidarity economy supporters. We need to ensure that it can make a difference to the lives of people at a time when it's most sorely needed. So thank you very much once again, everyone. We wish you a good morning in the United States and their areas around Latin America. A good evening to those of you in Europe. And I suppose good night and late night to those in Asia. Thank you very much, and I say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.